Um, week 7, day 1, Acts chapter 15, and we start seeing a little bit of controversy within the church. And a group comes to Paul and to Barnabas and says that unless these new believers are circumcised, they can't be saved. And Paul and Barnabas, they it looks like they form or come to a council, or they come to a group and they meet to discuss. And Peter stands up in verses 6 and through 15, 16, and really recounts what has happened. He says, "You know that in the early days of God made a choice among you that by my mouth the Gentiles should hear the word of the gospel and believe. And God knows their hearts and bore witness to that by giving them the Holy Spirit, just as he did to us." So Peter is stressing that he shared the gospel with them. They believed. God gave them the Holy Spirit, and he's made no distinction between us and them. And says, "Now therefore, why are you putting God to the test by placing a yoke on their neck, of this yoke of circumcision, requiring circumcision?" And circumcision would have been a huge deal for the Jews at that time. It was a sign of the Abrahamic covenant, and something that all Jewish believers, all Jews would have had to have done according to their law. And they carried that over as those Jews became Christians. They held on to that, and we're requiring that of the new Gentile believers. And Peter, Paul, Barnabas are saying, no, we shouldn't put that burden on them. That it is through faith, and this faith has been borne witness because of the receiving of the Holy Spirit. And they did devise, it appears, some sort of compromise. In verse 20, they're told to abstain from things that are polluted by idols, and from immorality, basically sexual immorality, and food that has been strangled, and from blood. An animal that was strangled the blood would not leave the animal as it would if the animal were killed in a different manner. So to abstain from blood and idolatry, things that were in connection with idolatry. So there is a compromise, not so much in faith to believe, but in then how to live that out. And these food laws, the sexual immorality, the food laws, the things polluted by idol, that would have been certainly very important issues for the Jews at that time. So we do see a compromise. They take this letter back to Antioch, to the church, to the Jews, or to the Gentiles there, with those requirements, and they celebrate. And it says in verse 36, after some days, Paul and Barnabas, they said, "Let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord, and see how they're doing." So Paul wants to go back with Barnabas to basically where they went in chapters 13 and 14, to revisit the churches. And Barnabas wants to take John Mark, a relative of his. We've heard he was sent back in early chapter 13, and Paul does not agree with that. And it says there arose a sharp disagreement. And because of that sharp disagreement, Paul and Barnabas part ways. And Paul goes one direction, and Barnabas sails across towards Cyprus. So it's interesting. In one case, in Acts 15, we see compromise and a common ground is reached. And in a second incident between Paul and Barnabas, we see that there is a dispute that is not resolved. And as a result, they pass and they part ways. So it shows sometimes, I believe we should always strive for compromise and unity and agreement, but there are times when there is no such thing, and times where just kind of agreeing to disagree and parting ways is the only solution. And that's what we see at the end of chapter 15. And we see that Silas now joins Paul as they head back out to visit churches. So have a fantastic day. Sorry this is a little bit later this morning, but we'll hit Acts chapter 16 tomorrow. And let me know if you have questions or what God is teaching you as you read these sections, these chapters in Acts. And again, I pray you be faithful and that you have a great day. God bless.